Okay, it looks like it's time to go, everybody. So, hi, Kevin Furman here, and we are kicking off a brand new year of the Book of the Month Club here at E3LC. And I want to do another kind of introduction to the whole thing because I never know when someone's joining in for the first time. So, I want to make sure that everybody feels welcome and is really understanding that it's fine when you come and it's okay if you don't make it. Right, this is sort of an open forum, and I'm happy to kind of discuss things that I've been reading my entire adult life and things that have been very helpful for me in this journey we all call life. So, first off, again, welcome. And I wanted to talk about the E3LC one more time. So, E3 is speaking about the three E's that I use to keep a framework of what's important about leadership, becoming a better person, learning how to create a great life, uh, get less stress in your life, whatever. It's all those things. That's what I really want to point to when I think about the three E's. And the three E's are effective with people, efficient with things, and encouraging with myself. So what we do with the book of the month is we take a month and delve into a book that is part of one of those three E's. And we happen to be in the first series. So we're doing effective with people. And so this first book, and as I record this is the beginning of a new year. So we're starting out and we're doing effective with people. And so that's going to be your first one. I also will be recording a bunch of videos on just snippets of the ideas and things that I think will be helpful to understand kind of where I'm coming from, certain concepts. And if people are looking for leadership training or coaching or just want to get some advice or whatever, I'm going to throw out some ideas that I use in my training and ideas that I've developed over the years that help illuminate what's good about these things that we try to do when we lead. So, all right, so that's E3LC. The LC part is leadership training and coaching. So I do leadership training and I also do coaching, and those are different. Those are very different, actually. And now that I am delving into the world of coaching, what's really interesting is I wasn't clear that they were that much different in the past. And what's great about this last year for me is that I took the time to get some really deep and meaningful training in the coaching world and understanding how to really differentiate coaching from other things. So it's not consulting, it's not mentoring, it's not therapy, right? It's actually a process of getting people from kind of functional to optimal is a good way to kind of start that conversation about coaching. So E3LC is the three E's in leadership training and coaching. So another piece of this whole thing is actually what this book is of this month. So there's another piece that I've found really helpful throughout the years. It's been very insightful for me to be able to work with so many different people. And even though I haven't been perfect at it my whole life, I've been fairly effective with understanding where people are coming from, why they kind of do what they do for the most part, and also how to approach a situation so that it best works for them. Right. So being effective with people is a large topic actually, and it is certainly not manipulating people or making them do what you want. That is being more, actually you're trying to be efficient with them. You're not really being effective with them. Being effective means you're working with somebody, right? So I'll talk more about that in another time, but I wanted to at least give it some context for this month's book, because this month's book is really, really geared towards that. And I've been looking forward to talking about this book and these series of books actually for a few months now. And it's always in the back of my mind. Whenever I start talking about working with people, it's one of the first things that pops into my mind of, is this concept clear for people, or is there some time that could be taken to kind of illuminate how we deal with each other and how to understand people better so that there isn't as much friction, right? And that is the book Personality Plus by Florence Littauer. So we're going to just do a little bit of the book this week. So there's about 17 chapters, if I'm not mistaken. And so there's sections. There's actually 5 sections. We're just going to do the first section, and it's not very many pages, right? And I'll explain why as we go. But one thing you should know is when you do a book, okay, so not a great big book, right? Not a real thick book. Some people don't like to read, right? And I imagine like when they hear about a book of the month club, they're like, oh man, reading a whole book every month. Oh, it sounds crazy. If you read, the thing about this is, I haven't said this much in this series, but I'm going to say it, and I'm going to say it often, I think, from here on, because I think it's worth repeating many, many times. And that is, if you read just 10 minutes a day, right? Or you could say 10 pages a day, right? So it depends, right? If you're a really fast reader, you could say 10 pages a day, I can get it done really fast, boom, I move on. If you're a slow reader, you could say, I got to get my 10 pages in, right? If you do 10 pages a day, every day, right? No skipping any days, right? That's 300 pages a month. Well, this book is 190 some, 197, 193, something like that, right? So I think it's 193 unless you start reading into the appendix. It gets a little over 200. Well, you can definitely read this whole book within the month, no problem. Which is why book of the month things really work well unless they're talking about novels, right? And that's a whole nother thing, and that's not what we're doing here. This is actually a series to help you figure out what you really want, and then see if there are any roadblocks to that. See if there's any habits you've created that are getting in your own way of having what you really want. Or maybe there's things that you hadn't thought about that you didn't even know about, or you didn't think they were important, but when you put some, shed some light on it, you begin to see like, that is important to me. And that may create a whole new awareness of what you really do want out of your life. I think too many people spend time doing what they are expected to do by others, right? From their parents, their friends, society, whatever. There's this either heavily spoken or all the way to unspoken set of parameters that are put in place for people. And it could just be a side comment. It could be a constant day-to-day thing where you're told what to do and how to do it and why to do it. Sometimes that works out well. And yet I keep hearing, in the past year, I keep hearing multiple stories about how people were doing the normal, in our society and the Western culture, the normal way to go about doing life, which is you go to school, you learn a trade or you learn a profession, you get a job, or you even start a business, whatever, and then you go about being successful there, and then you start a family, etc. That track, right? And I'm not disparaging any of what I just said. I'm just telling you that I've heard many stories over the last year of people that did that, yet they weren't satisfied. They weren't fulfilled. It didn't fulfill them because they didn't pick a path in that realm that was that fit them, who they are at the core. They were following a path set by them by others, either, again, well-intentioned or not. They weren't following their own path. They were following the path of other people that they were expected to follow. And they bought into it, not necessarily in a bad way, but they bought into that and then realized down the road, 5, 10, 20 years later, I don't enjoy this. This isn't, I don't want to do this, right? Now, those that have figured that out earlier on and went for what they really wanted have been much more, in my estimation, this is all anecdotal, and it's from me too, because I tend to think of myself as someone who did that in the past and continues to do that in lots of ways that I'm sure people looking at what I do think I'm crazy or, off the rails or whatever. But it certainly all leads into what I'm about, right? Which is about helping other people get what they really want. That's what my deal is here. And I've done that in different ways. And I've figured out that that's why I did my musical career for so long, was it fulfilled that. I was helping people play music at a deep level and getting really great results very fast. And it was serving them. It was serving in what they wanted. And then I began to expand and look at, well, there's other parts of life than just music. Well, could I gain skills or be associated with things that will help people get what they want in other areas? Finances, health, life in general, right? Figuring out figuring out your deal and how do you get there. And I think the coaching part of what I've been developing is kind of I wouldn't say the final, but it's the broadest extension of that idea of serving others and helping them get what they want. Because coaching can cover any area you want. And that process can help people find out what's holding them back and actually get them moving. So anyway, all right. So that's all that. And the book itself, Personality Plus, again, quick read 10 pages a day. You can get through most any book that we're going to talk about. There might be a few here and there, 2 or 3 this year that'll be a little bit longer than that, but we won't do them right away, right? So if you're used to reading 10 pages a day, you create that habit over a couple months, reading an extra, doing 12 pages a day or 13 pages a day gets you through a longer book, right? That gets you another 40, 50 pages, right? If you need to, maybe it's 15 pages a day. All right. Then you're getting into the 400 some pages a month. So that, those are fairly large books. So it's really, if you break it down into little chunks, it's doable, right? And that's another topic that we'll get into in the second E, which is being efficient with things. We'll get into that whole idea another day. All right. So Personality Plus. So Florence kind of sets the table this way. She makes a really good point at the very beginning of the first chapter. So chapter 1, well, okay, there's sections and then there's chapters within the sections, or parts. So part 1 is called Personality Profile, a quick method of self-examination. So she kind of sets the table this way, and I think it's a really good idea. Well, not that she needs my approval, but she's been quite successful without me, that's for sure. But I do agree with what she started with, and she the very first thing she says is there's only one you. You do not have to fit a template. You don't have to try to be the right version, right? There's a you that's authentic. She doesn't tend to use that word authentic very much in the book, but she speaks to it very much. So it's very clear that that's the thought behind what she's writing, is being who you are, and also being willing to acknowledge that that comes with some strengths and some weaknesses. And those are okay. There's nothing wrong with having some great strengths, and obviously, and there's nothing wrong with having some weaknesses, as long as you don't overplay your strengths and ignore your weaknesses. I think there's the two dangers, and she talks about it in the book. We'll get to that later chapters, but everyone is a mixed bag. That's the other thing to keep in mind, and something that's been very clear to me recently. Once again, I realize this constantly with people. People are a package, right? Which I'm quoting from a business associate of mine who's very, very successful, and that's a quote of hers. Thank you, Nancy. So people are a package, right? No one is completely perfect, and no one is completely all bad or evil. We're all a mix, right? Hopefully a lot more on the better side that's helpful, and hopefully that's true for most people. I think that by and large that is true, that most people they try to do the best they can. I think almost everyone does the best they can with the tools they have so far in their life, what they've learned, etc. And speaking of that, that's a lot what this book is about, tools. Okay, so she, again, going back to her, she says there's only one you, and that nobody's alike. Everybody's unique. There is no cookie cutter. Everybody that's kind of like this is always this way. There are traits, there are tendencies, there are things like that. But because of our personal experiences, our personal DNA, even in the same circumstance, two different people are going to react differently to that because of that makeup, because of their personal experience and how they interpret things and their set of values and their belief system, etc. So she makes a big point of that, right? So that we're all unique. And so what we're trying to do is figure out, well, how do we work together, right? If we're all different, then how do we work together? If we, how do I know what they're going to think? Well, there are, like I just mentioned, there are tendencies, right? And so what she is trying to illuminate is there are these large tendencies. And if you think in these terms, it's easier to understand where someone's coming from and how to relate to them. That's what's really, really powerful about this way of thinking. And it's a cornerstone in my leadership training. It's one of the major points I make is these personality styles, and they're based in social styles, right? What I'm doing is the social style thing. And if you talk about personality styles, there's a ton of different tests you can take on the internet and whatnot, and there's different forums. There's these social styles. There's formal training in these. DISC is one of them that's very popular and quite good. It's very similar, a little more detailed in some ways, but there's a lot of similarities. There's the Myers-Briggs thing that's very, very popular in the business world, has been forever. But I'm finding, whatever you use, great, right? Now, she's going to talk more about the personality styles, and I tend to go there because, one, it keeps it pretty simple. 4 is an easy number to handle. There are 4 basic personality styles that she brings up, and we'll talk about those in next week, actually, in the next video. The 4 is a good number to handle, right? So instead of there being 32, even 16, even 8, right? 8's okay, but trying to keep that all straight, and you're talking to somebody and you're trying to, figure that out. 4's easier to deal with. Now, is it simpler? Yeah, and you actually do sort of have a blend, so it does kind of incorporate all those others. But having those major headings, I think, is easier to just have a good approach, and then you adjust as you learn more. All right. Okay. So then she says, well, where do I start with all this, right? What do I do? So her big thing is in the second chapter is just, well, let's figure out where you are. Let's figure out you, right? Let's figure out what your personality is before we start dealing with everybody else. Let's look inward first. Always a good idea when you're trying to figure out something with people. I've found one of the most important things you can do is always check yourself first. What did I do to contribute to this? Is there something I could have done that would have made it gone better? Did I somehow really blow it and that caused the problem? If, whatever, right? But really looking for you in here first, asking for input from other people if necessary / appropriate. And then you can then start to look at, okay, well, I did these and that still happens. So there must be something going on. I didn't read this correctly, right? So it's still, you're checking you, but you're also realizing that, like, okay, there's something going on I didn't realize. So I need to figure that out and make sure I address that situation a little bit differently, etc. So anyway, the way she does her personality profile, which I would love to just do, and I'm not going to share the whole thing on here because, wow, it's Florence's, right? But basically is you basically, it's a self-assessment kind of deal. There's a list of a bunch of words, and the way that they've arranged it is there's 4 personality styles, so there's 4 words per answer, if you will, and you pick the one that's most applicable to you. Which one sounds most like you, right? Which one do you identify with? Which one you resonate with? Which one is a little more accurate than the others? And they were really clever about it in that each question, all the words start with the same letter. So that's pretty cool. And there's 20 of those. So they ask you 20 sets of 4 words, and I'll just give you the first one just to give you an example, right? So the first one is, what's the most accurate for you? Adventurous, adaptable, animated, or analytical, right? So they all start with A, and even though, you know, if you've got some experience with this, you can kind of tell where they're going with some of these for sure. There's some words in here that are very, very clear. They point to a certain style. That's fine, whatever. But just, you know, take it as when you do this kind of thing, don't try to figure out what the right answer is because it's you. Right? Whatever you answer as accurate is the right answer, right? Don't just try to guess what you want it to be. What is really you? And that way you'll get a really solid sense of your profile. So you do 20 strengths and then you also do 20 weaknesses. And I found it interesting rereading this book to when you're taking that assessment, the heading strengths and weaknesses, right? It's definitely on purpose, right? That's not a mistake and great because that's how it works. But um, the weaknesses one, right? So people don't like to admit their weaknesses. So I was trying to, so in my assessments, I'm actually looking for a way to do that without the stigma of, I got to identify my own weakness. Oh, this is fun, right? So if you can just, yeah, yep, that's me. Yep, that's me. Yep, that's me. And it happens to be a weakness, right? You're not saying it's a weakness, but just, yep, that fits. That's what I'm figuring out. So when I do that, that's what I try to do is figure out how to identify those without the stigma attached to, oh, I want that as a strength, so I'll pick that one. And, ooh, I don't like that about myself, so I'm not going to pick that, right? So if you can get away from that and just, these are the things that are me, right? And then they shake out as strengths or weaknesses later. That would be the only thing I would tweak about this whole thing. And again, she's way more successful with this than I have been at this point. So I'm not going to say she did it wrong or anything like that. But that's the only thing that I would tweak for me, right? That I would want to do just so that it's a little bit more. I don't know. There's less filtering going on, right? If you can just, it gives you more of an honest answer, if you will. And then you score it, right? And they go through and the words that you're given on the questions are in a mixed up order, and then they say, okay, so here are the answers, and if it was this one, you're this type. If it's this one, you're this type, and they reorder them so that they're all in the same column. That will make a lot more sense if you read the book and look at it. So you total those up for each of the 4 personality styles. You do the same with the weaknesses. You total those, and then you add those 2 for each of the 4, and you get a total for each one. So technically, you could get 40 in one style and 0 in all the others, right? So it adds up to 40 between the 4 things. So if you got 10 in each, then you're somehow perfectly balanced with all 4 styles. I don't know anybody that's really that. A lot of people like to think that. I think in some ways that looks like an ideal. And I certainly, I can certainly identify with that thought because I certainly had that thought for a long time. And even though that may be true or may not be true, I don't know. I think it's, I think it's interesting that also others don't care at all, right? It's even just in taking this assessment, I guess that's where I'm going, is people react to it very differently. They avoid it, or they don't like it, or they think it's awesome because it really is like, oh, I never thought of that. That's great, whatever, right? So anyway, so usually what's going to happen is one of those 4 is going to have a strong showing in the numbers, right? As you add things up, you'll see one it's larger. And then you'll have sort of, a pecking order, so to speak, like the highest, second highest, third, and then the last one. And so that gives you an idea of your mix. And I think there's more to be said about that mix. And that's what I'm doing with when I present this. I do it a little bit differently in my presentation of personality styles. We'll get to that another day. This is about the book, not about me. So I use the idea of it, and then I'm trying to flesh that out a little bit more and really talk about, well, how do you talk to other people, right? So take it to that level. All right. So that's the first 2 chapters, right? They're very short, not a big deal. And it certainly isn't it isn't a fourth of the book. It's actually pretty small compared to the rest of the book. But that's okay. We're going to cover some more chapters next week and get through some things. But that is really what's going on is, hey, figure out who you are, right? Take that first step. And if you haven't done something like that, this is a great way to do it. It's pretty non-abrasive and it is pretty illuminating. So it does help quite a bit. So take the time to do that assessment and then ask some people, what do you think? Does that seem to be me? You know, and just get a picture of, is that actually me? You know, is that how people see me, or is this weird or whatever? And if they say, yeah, that sounds about you, then you were pretty honest with your answers, and boom, you can move forward, right? If they say, no, that doesn't make any sense, so maybe, you know, go back. Were you answering the questions you wanted to answer as correct, or the ones that actually were correct, so to speak? So just, you know, try to get an honest snapshot of where you are at this moment. And if you've done it before, but it's been more than a year, do it again, right? Do a different one. There's nothing wrong with taking different personality assessments and, you know, see if they compare somehow and if you're consistent between them. There's nothing wrong with any of that. I think that's not going to hurt you, and they don't take long. So I'd say go for it. All right. Well, that is it for that. So that's the first couple of chapters of Personality Plus. I'll see you next time with the next video. If you got any questions, please get a hold of me. You can email me at kfurman@e3lc.net or leave a comment on the video. And we will see you next time.